Good evening, everyone. I'm Apostle T.B. Walker. I want to take this time to welcome you to our Thursday Night Live Bible study. Certainly glad that you're here. We're going to continue with our study of Moses today. Well, I say Moses, but it's actually the book of Exodus, chapter 6, verse number 1. That's where we're going to be. But it is such an in-depth study of Moses. It's really about, what God is doing, how he's building Moses into the leader that he wants him to be, and how he's tearing down his life and beginning to build a new life for Moses, I say that unashamedly, that it is God who is tearing down this old life. This is the work of God himself and building Moses into a new man. That's exactly what God does for us. And so we're also getting a revelation of God. We're getting a revelation about who God is, how he works. And they are getting a real serious dose of the fact that God's ways are just not like their ways, and his timing is totally different. Let's take a look at chapter 6, verse number 1. Here's what it says. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand he will let them go, and with a strong hand he will drive them out of his land." Now, let's recap, because we realize that the last time we see Moses, he's on his face. He's discouraged. He's in a place where he's looking and God has just left him alone. He's put his name out there. He stepped out, and put himself out in the line, and nothing has happened. Matter of fact, something has happened. Things have just gotten worse. And he's come back with accusations that God has been inactive, that his timing is off, that he has promised to do something that he has not done. And so as he is now succumbing to this great attack, which is the enemy always uses discouragement to get you sidelined and begin to get you to look for someone to blame. But Moses is not having a pity party. Moses is having a blame party. He's pointing his finger and he's looking at someone to blame for this problem. He's being blamed. The children of Israel have come to him. So now he's coming, and I guess he's rolling the ball up and he's saying, I know who's to blame. It's God. So, the interesting thing is that, Moses has gone before Pharaoh, and he has not come to Pharaoh like this. He's not as bold this way with Pharaoh, yet he's bold this way with God. And the interesting thing is that no matter what Moses has thought or known or believed at one point, he knows that Pharaoh is a man, right? He knows for certain that Pharaoh is a human man. No matter what the Egyptian thought is that he's a god, he knows that he's a man. Pharaoh has never manifested anything supernatural in front of Moses. Yet God has manifested himself in a burning bush that talks, manifested himself as omnipresent in that he was with him in Midian, and now he's here talking to him in Egypt. And yet Moses is really insolent in a way. He's really bold. He feared someone he knew was a human over someone he knew was supernatural and omnipresent. Isn't that amazing how we do that, how we can forget who God is and how he's manifested himself before us in so many ways in our life in the past. And we get in front of people that we're in awe of. We get in front of situations that seem so much larger than us. We get into challenges that just seem like they're insurmountable. And we look and we just fold like lawn chairs. We throw the white flag up right away. And we forget who has sent us here. We forget why we're here, and we forget whose power has compelled us and propels us to be where we are right at that spot. So Moses complains, God has done evil here. God has done wrong here. That's what Moses is actually saying. You have not kept your end of the bargain by, telling us that you're going to do this and you're going to do that, and then somehow you have not done it. So when you begin to look at this, one of the things that you begin to see here is that Moses begins to accuse God of doing something wrong. He accuses God of doing something evil here. And that's the thing that I like here about God, because, when you think of the word God, when you think of God, you think of righteousness and sovereignty and, majesty and all these other words that are there, but you never think of cool. But God is really cool in how he handles Moses, how he handles everyone that complains. It's really cool, and cool in so many ways. Cool in the way that he, you can see very even, but cool in this supernatural, fully functioning confidence. Just brimming with the true definition of what it is to know. And God is not flustered by Moses' complaints. He's not angry in any way by what Moses does. He doesn't even answer some of the complaints. Moses says, why? God doesn't even answer why. But he says, listen, it's about timing, my son. He says, you're going to see now. He says, now you're going to see what I'm going to do with your own eyes. You're going to see what I'm going to do to Pharaoh. His answer is to Moses is that, I know you want to know why, but Moses, this is not about why. This is about the fact that you need to know that I'm in control. No matter what the situation is, no matter what the turns are in your life, I am in absolute control. The fact that it doesn't work out, you have to understand it wasn't meant to work out. There's some things we look at it, if God is involved, it's going to work the way we believe it's going to work out. Working out is going to be our view of success, our view of victory. And there's some things that are not meant to work out, and that's victory. There's some things that are not meant to happen, and that's success. That God has said, I planned it this way. This is part of the story. This is not some turn that I didn't know about. This is not some counterpunch that God is using. This is actually a part of the story. And there's some twists and turns in your life that are actually part of the plan that we look at and say, I could be here if I hadn't done that. You couldn't be. This is all a part of the plan. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. And so the truth of the matter is, there are places that you think that you could just have averted. There are mountains that you thought you should have climbed, or valleys that you should have just gone around. But the truth of the matter is, it is the same God who says, listen, I'm leading you beside the still waters. It's the same God who leads you through those very same valleys. Before he even prepares a table, before you're in the presence of your enemies, that valley is necessary. It's a part of the plan. So Moses had succumbed to discouragement. And that's one of the biggest tricks of the enemy. To get us sidelined, he uses this tactic of discouragement. Woe is me. There's nothing I can do. I'm done. There's no other help that I know. And somehow Moses got discouraged. And he got discouraged because he was too impressed with Pharaoh. And he was not impressed enough with God. He had just gotten in awe of his circumstance, in awe of his situation, and he just wasn't in awe of God. His awe of God was not bigger than his awe of his problem. His adversary seemed larger than his help. So when you look at it like that, you're going to crumble. Moses crumbles here, and he goes into a blame game. He's not coming submissive. He's not coming looking for wisdom. He's not coming looking for marching instructions. He's not looking and saying, I just need an order. No, Moses coming and saying, you've done me wrong, and he's now broken. He's down on the ground, and God has to come and pick him up. And what God gives him as a pronouncement is not an answer to why you did this and why you did that. No, he says, now you're going to see. It's timing. Now is the time. He says, listen, now you're going to see. God's not disputing with Moses, but he reveals that he's doing things in his timing. He's revealing that he has timing. Moses does not know. When Moses says, God, you said you're going to do stuff, I'm thinking you're going to do it right now. And God is like, listen, one of the things you got to know about me is that I am God and I operate in my timing. God operates in eternity. But when he kind of sends and to work in our world for us, we have to now understand and submit to the fact that God has timing. That means that he has planning. There's things that are already set up to be at a certain time, and nothing will change the timing. This is comfort to Moses because he's saying, listen, the time is at hand. The time is now. It's going to happen. So he's telling Moses that he has the Egyptians right where he wants them. But here's the thing that he says, and this is really interesting. And I like the way he says this. He says, for with a strong hand, he will let them go. And with a strong hand, he will drive them out of his land. Now, God is using this term, strong hand. He's describing how he's going to deal with Pharaoh, and how Pharaoh is eventually going to deal with them, right? He's going to succumb to the power that God is actually saying that he's going to use. He's using this phrase, with a strong hand, right? That he's going to compel, that he's going to forcefully intervene on their behalf to force Pharaoh to let them go. Pharaoh's grip is tighter than it has ever been. They have not experienced a grip like this in their time. Their parents had never been through the kind of struggle that they're experiencing right now And yet God comes and says, the time is now, even though the squeeze is tighter than ever. Even though there's no generation they know about that has ever gone through what they've gone through, here's what God tells Moses: the timing is now. The time is at hand. The circumstances does not dictate the timing. The situation does not in any way move God's plan one way or the other, left or right. It's the economy's bad. This president is in. God said, well, listen, my timing is not based upon those things. I know all those things. Even those things I set up and orchestrated. So even when things look bad, we kind of think, okay, God, you're going to intervene. And we sometimes miss the idea that God is actually orchestrating the ugliness. That some of the things that look ugly are meant to look ugly because that ugliness is going to be a blessing to us. That some of us need the ugliness to wake us up. Some of us need the ugliness to try our faith. Some of us need the ugliness to expose what's in us. So even the ugliness that we look and say, God's not in the ugliness. God is in the ugliness sometimes, simply because God knows that the ugliness is exactly what we need. The confrontation is what we need. David doesn't come into the throne by coronation. David comes to the throne by killing a giant. This giant against a kid is an absolute setup. They didn't know that God was practicing him already by killing a lion and a bear. God didn't know that they didn't know he was being practiced already by being abandoned by his own family. He walked out there with a reckless abandon because he had been abandoned. All of those things that were allowed by God, orchestrating the ugliness. The ugly cloud is not in control. The dark cloud does not just roll on its own. The dark cloud is subject to the majesty and control of God. So when you look at what's going on here, God says, listen, Pharaoh's not going to want to let you go. I know he's not going to want to let you go. You're looking for a change in attitude. You've forgotten I have the power to force into being what I want to be against the very will of a puny man. You are the one, Moses, who's lifting up Pharaoh. So when you look at this, God says, I'm going to compel him to do it, but it's going to be complete. I want you to understand, I'm doing a complete work here. I know you want me to clean up the surface and make it nice and shiny for you, but underneath it's still dead. No, I'm gonna do something that is going to be a complete work. God had promised that he would drive him out with a strong hand. Now, interestingly enough, when God says this, you got to think about where Moses is. This is mission impossible. There's no way this is going to happen, right? When you look at this, Pharaoh's reaction does not indicate that he's going to do any of what God has said. How often are we tried in that very same way? You look at the scripture and it says, whose report are you going to believe? Right. And we look at those things and we look at those as those are major things that we have to kind of decide. And we always look and say, I'm going to believe the report of the Lord. But listen, when you get into situations like this is one of those things where the question is asked. If it's between this or that and it's easy, no, that's not the real question. The question is when it looks impossible. When God says, I'm going to open a door that has been shut to you. When God says, I'm going to make a way where you have tried to figure out at 20 ways and no way can you possibly see it can happen without a miracle. And a miracle is just that, a miracle. It's a one in how many times does that happen in your life? And God says, what makes you think it can't happen? What makes you think I won't do a miracle? I mean, what makes you think if you need a miracle, I won't give you a miracle? I'm the one who put you in front of the Red Sea in the first place. Why? Because I want to do something supernatural in your life. I want to do something miraculous. This thing that you think is bad is actually an open door to something supernatural happening in your life. So when you begin to look at this is mission impossible. And God says, awesome. I want you to see it. I'm going to do the impossible. You have to understand, with me, there's nothing that's impossible. So there's no anger, though, in what God is doing. There's no judgment in what he says. You don't see him bringing out a whip. There's only comfort. God's not infuriated with Moses. He's not angry that Moses is now showing a lack of faith, because that's exactly what he's doing. But you know what? I want you to see here the patience that God is showing here with Moses. I want you to really begin to see how he's nurturing Moses and realizing the ignorance that Moses operates in. He knows that Moses doesn't know. There's some things that Moses is not aware of. Moses thinks he's done all that he can do, and God is telling him by giving him this wonderful message of grace and message of comfort about his timing. But I want you to really, really look at this, and I want you to be careful, as you watch this, because the way we come to God is really, really it's essential that we understand who we're talking to. Moses here is almost like a baby. And some people look at this and say, this is the way we need to do it. Look at how the great lawgiver came. Moses was called a friend of God. He understood and knew God's ways. Moses was called a friend. He walked with God. So there were so many different, there's a great nuance in this relationship. And God is showing Moses about friendship with him. When you look at this, one of the things you see here with God is that God is open and happy to receive those who are walking in obedience, our questions. That this whole idea of you can't bring your questions to God. That is not true. You can see here, as you look at this situation here with Moses, as you look at Job, as you look at many of the prophets, they have poured out their hearts to God. Jesus comes even in the garden and he says, Lord, let this cup pass from me. He pours out his heart. He sweats blood. How serious is that? With his anguish, he brings it to God. When we're walking in obedience, we are able to bring those things to God and say, God, you give me an assignment that seems hard for me. You give me an assignment with things I don't understand. Lord, I am just finite, and this seems so much bigger than me. That's not a problem here. But the problem is how he approached God. Moses comes at God and he complains to God that there was no evidence whatsoever that God was keeping his end of the bargain. This was an accusation. This was not Moses coming with humility. This was not Moses coming, with an understanding that, listen, I don't know everything. I remember how you found me. I remember where you found me. I remember the situation I got myself into. So I should be careful of how I come to you. But no, Moses is coming here, in an example, in a way that we should not come to God. That Moses comes here in a way that's wrong because he comes accusing God of doing evil. He comes accusing holy and righteous God of doing wrong. And that's not the way for those who know God to come to God. He doesn't come and say, Lord, there's some things I don't understand. Lord, I need your wisdom and your guidance. I need you to show me the way. He does not come in that way. He accuses God of not delivering his people at all like he promised to do. He comes to God and says, you say you're a promise keeper, but you are not. Give me some evidence that you really are who you say you are. Prove yourself to me. So everything here that God has done before Moses ever speaks it, it's clearly proven because God is here with him in Egypt. Clearly proven because he has had an audience with Pharaoh in the first place. The fact that this guy could get an audience with Pharaoh, God has already opened doors. He's already proven it. Now Moses says, hey, that's not enough. I need another reference. Before I hire you as my God, I need another reference from you. Listen, I want you to see this. I agree that it's a great thing to be honest with the Lord. Because listen, he already knows how we feel anyway. Right? I mean, we want to be honest with God. But there's a right way to come to God. There's a right way to talk to God. Listen, let's remember, this is not your buddy. As much as you would like to believe so, this is the creator of all things. This is not a buddy. The one who walked with Adam was walking with one who he made Adam a friend of his. He made Abraham a friend of his, and they all gave him honor. Abraham bowed before him, knew who he was and his holiness, offered offerings unto this God. This is not one that is like a mere man that we can just accuse and have a falling out with when we get ready. And forget. These are things that, listen, we don't do those with kings on the earth. We don't do those with people that are the owners of our companies. We don't do those with our direct supervisors, our managers. We know how to come. Nobody's slamming doors. Listen, you know how to come in. You're not kicking over tables. None of those things are happening. But somehow with God, we get to the spot where we can get angry enough and forget who he is, not who we are, but who he is. Now, the moment we forget who he is, we've already forgotten who we are. The moment we get lifted up in pride, you've already forgotten yourself. So it's clear that you're going to get yourself in trouble here with God. And this is just the greatness of God's mercy, that this man here is given the revelation that he's given. Here, God could have sent a lightning bolt, but the wonder of God is this: he sends a revelation. That's what God wants to do. If any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God. But listen, let's ask of God correctly, because Moses comes, not only with a complaint, but he has no submission here. There's no respect here. There's no fear of the Lord. And the Bible says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Listen, you have to acknowledge that you don't understand. Listen, that's a good thing. But it don't imply that somehow you know better than God. Don't imply that somehow God his plan is not working. That somehow what you perceive to be working is not working for you. That somehow what you've identified as the way is not working out the way you wanted to work out. So therefore, God must be off track. Somehow the fact that you determine where the finish line is, the fact that you decided what success is, if those things aren't matched, then somehow God needs to come up some. No, we have to understand that there's a way that seems right to us, and those ways lead to destruction. It's God that somehow takes us the long way. Somehow it's God who takes us the harder route. And we don't need to say, well, if God takes you the harder route, then it must not be the harder route. No, it's the harder route. Why? Because we need the harder route. The truth to be told, there's some things that are tough. And the reality is we need those tough things to toughen us up. God is not building a bunch of pansies who are going to walk around and just, twist around in the desert. He's building a people who are going to have to fight, who are going to have to learn to trust God in order to win, who are going to have to hear strategy that they've never heard before, that makes no sense to their mind, that's counterintuitive. How in the world can they do these things if God does not try the faith that they say they have? So when you begin to look at this, that's exactly what's happening. God is now building a nation. God is building something in you. He's building something in your family. He's building something in your business. He's building something in your ministry. God is building something in you. And listen, because there are things that are rocky, you have to understand this is not the devil. You're not under some demonic attack. This is God who's sending you the longer way, because there's a work that has to happen that needs to be complete in you. It needs to be completed. God told Moses, listen, I'm bringing you this way in front of this Red Sea, surrounded by these rocks with Pharaoh behind you. So that the enemy that you've been dealing with all your life, after today, you'll deal with it no more. This whole thing that you've been going through is about complete deliverance, not temporary, not momentary, not the feeling of, but true deliverance. I'm healing you for real. And because you have to go through some rocks and some valleys does not mean that I'm not with you. And don't freak out, because I'm sending you there. It's meant for your good. And listen, there's a final say that God is getting here. And there's another revelation that God is giving here to Moses. And that's this: I'm still God, and I'm going to do things in my time. Listen, my hope is that this was a revelation. For some of you, this was a blessing to you. I know that camera angle, the light was kind of going in and out, but I didn't want to stop because I just want to make sure that you get this message. I think this is something that's going to be really important. And I know there are people who are going through all manner of struggles in various myriad of ways, but I want you to be encouraged and know this, that, God is sending you this rocky road and through this difficult way for some great purpose. He's building something in you and exposing things in you that you did not know you had. After you get through this and your transformation is sure, you're going to see, and you're going to thank God. You allowed me to be able to see miracles through that rocky way. You were supernatural, and you sustained me in ways that were impossible. I know you to be a God who's able to do the impossible. Listen, my hope is that you are blessed. I thank you for your support continuously. Don't forget to share. God bless you. Have an awesome rest of your Thursday.